Today I'll begin reading Love Ruby Lavender by Deborah Wiles. Chapter 1, June 4th. Murderers! You can't have them all. Ruby Lavender leaned out the car window and shook her fist. The car lurched to a halt in the dirt yard of Peterson's egg ranch, and Ruby scrambled out the door. She ran in bare feet as fast as she could in the dusty sea of chickens, a sea of chickens being herded toward their death at the chopping block. Miss Eula Doppelwein was driving the getaway car. She leaped from her seat and into the hot June sun and waved her arms wildly. "Run, run, run for your lives!" Chickens screeched and panicked. They ran and jumped and flapped their wings. Ruby opened her arms and swept herself like a wave through the squawking. "Gotcha!" She dropped to her knees and reached for chicken legs and necks and breasts, pulling them to herself. "I'll save you, girls." She had a face full of feathers. She swayed from side to side, trying to get her balance. Her left overall strap slipped off her shoulder. 3 men came running from inside the chicken house. The tallest one jerked down the bandana he wore around his mouth and nose. "Stop! Thieves! Get back here with those hens!" "Go away, Lucius!" yelled Miss Eula. She waved dust from her face with her big hat. "You won't miss a few old laying hens past their prime." Ruby struggled to stand with her arms full of chickens. She staggered to the car, a squawking hen under each arm, and tossed them through the open window of the back seat. "Hit it, Miss Eula!" Another hen ran screaming straight for Ruby and nearly knocked her down. Ruby grabbed it. "Good garden of peas! Well, get in!" She tossed it into the car, then climbed through the open window right behind it. "Hurry, Miss Eula!" "You're crazy, Eula!" shouted Lucius. "Crazy!" Chickens flew at Lucius, pecking his hard boots. Others raced like a river over a dam, through the split-rail fence, across the country road, and into the surrounding fields. "Go, girls, go!" Miss Eula put her hands on her hips. "How would you like to be on someone's dinner plate, Lucius?" Lucius a la king. Lucius and his workers didn't know which way to run first as they tried to shush the puddle of chickens left at their feet. Miss Eula flounced back into the car. She jerked the gear shift into drive and pulled out of Peterson's egg ranch, weaving the big car slowly right and left as she dodged chickens and stirred up dust. "How many did we get?" "We got 3. They're red." Next to Ruby sat 3 of the most pitiful-looking, nervous creatures she had ever laid eyes on. They clucked and stared at her. 3? That's a good number, a lucky number. You are a good partner, Ruby Lavender, for a 9-year-old. Miss Eula winked at Ruby. "And you are a good getaway driver, for a grandmother." Ruby winked back. "Folks will keep eating chicken all right, but they won't eat these 3. Now will they?" "They surely won't," said Ruby. "I can't wait to get to know them." "We'll get to know them together." The car traveled smoothly down the country road. The chickens squawked and flapped and put up a ruckus. Miss Eula's and Ruby's eyes met in the rearview mirror. They smiled at each other. They giggled. And then they laughed and laughed. June 6th. Ruby finished the letter she was writing and folded it 3 times quickly. She jumped up, knocking her chair backward, and shoved the note into the big front pocket of her overalls. Then she raced outside, slapping the screen door against the house. Her mother sat cross-legged in the vegetable garden next to a giant hill of zucchini. scribbling into a notebook in her lap. She looked up, squinted under the brim of her straw hat. "Whoa! What's the emergency?" "Got mail to deliver," called Ruby. "Important mail. A matter of life or death. Be home for supper, if you're still alive." Ruby waved a hand raggedly and ran. Her bare feet slapped the dirt road, and her ponytailed red hair leaped all over the place, like a fire chasing her down the hill. She saw the long way into town. She always did, since the accident. When she came to the town sign, she leaned against it to catch her breath. "Welcome to Hallelujah, Mississippi. Population, 400 good, friendly folks, and a few old soreheads." Every storefront in Hallelujah faced Main Street. Behind the stores ran a sandy lane. Ruby followed it, past the back of the laundromat and the bank, to the post office. She patted her pocket. Yes, the note was still there. Behind the post office grew a majestic silver maple tree. Its roots stretched themselves out underground, popping up here and there, knobby, like big scraped knees. Hidden in a root tangle was a dry hole just big enough for a sack of marbles or a softball. But Ruby never put her softball into this hole. It was her secret mailbox. She pulled the letter from her pocket to put it in the knothole. But wait, she had mail. It was pink. First, she made sure no one was looking. The Tolbert twins were farther up the lane jumping rope. They didn't notice her. Old Ezra Jackson dozed in a chair behind the filling station. Ruby yanked the paper from the knothole and replaced it with her letter. She sat under the silver maple with the piece of pink paper and read, June 6th, Dear Ruby, today will be a busy day in the store. I can't wait to see you, even though we won't have time to drink a yoo-hoo together like we usually do. I will be anxious for a report on Ivy, Beamy, and Bess. Love, your favorite, only grandmother, Miss Eula. Ruby had a report all right. She couldn't wait to tell Miss Eula what had happened. It was all in the letter she had just put in the knothole. She would let Miss Eula know it was waiting for her. She walked past the back door of the post office, past the back of Doc McCree's office. Yes, sir, she had news. She felt puffed up and full of importance. She sauntered, pleased as she could be, through the back door of Miss Mattie Perkins' general store. Here's another letter, June 6th. Dear Miss Eula, oh, joy and happy day. Ivy has laid 3 eggs. I can't believe it. Beamy is so jealous. She is clucking all over the place. Ivy is saved from the chopping block, and she is going to have chicks of her own. What time will you be done working today so we can visit the chickens together? The eggs are brown. Love, your favorite, only grandchild, Ruby L. Chapter 2. Miss Mattie Perkins' mercantile was stuffed with everything anybody could want or need. Coffee beans and crackers were piled in big barrels. Overalls, work boots, and gloves were stacked on low wooden tables. A tall cooler stuffed full of homemade butter, fresh eggs, and grape-et pop hummed a low buzz all day. Miss Mattie spotted Ruby coming through the door. Just in time. Come over here, child, and help me with this box. Miss Mattie was wrestling with a ladder and trying to reach a shoebox on the top shelf of the back room. Ruby glanced around for any sign of Miss Euler, but didn't see her. She gave Miss Mattie a wan smile. Would you like me to get those shoes for you, Miss Mattie? You could be of some use if you did. Ruby scrambled up the ladder and grabbed the box. Miss Mattie brushed at the front of her dress. I sent Eula to check the mail. She patted her frizzled hair into place. Ruby handed her the shoebox and stepped down the ladder rungs to the floor. As Miss Mattie took the box, the sound of children laughing and ping, ping, ping of something spilling across the wooden floor stopped her short. What's that? She grabbed a broom. For pity's sake, it's those Latham children in the coffee beans. And here, we've got more customers than you can shake a stick at. I told Eula to hurry. She shoved the box at Ruby. Here, come help me with these shoes. They're for Layla Latham. She's been waiting for 10 minutes already, and those children won't let her think. You help her out. It will give you something to do while you wait. Ruby's heart jumped into her throat. She fumbled the box, then dropped it. But Miss Mattie, I can't. Ruby tried to get her aunt's attention, but Miss Mattie was already halfway across the store, waving her broom and shouting commands. Ruby's shoulders fell. She picked up the box, took a deep breath, and walked out of the back room and into the rich, warm smells of the general store. She felt herself deflating with every step, but still she held on to her important news and hoped Miss Eula might check the knothole for mail, too. Layla Latham didn't seem to notice the commotion around the coffee barrel. She was deep in conversation with Mr. Harvey Popham. Ruby approached her slowly, hoping with every breath that the woman would stand up and decide to leave the mercantile, but she didn't. Worse, as Ruby got closer, Mrs. Latham's eldest daughter, Melba Jane, flounced into the seat next to her mother and smiled at Ruby, a quick sugar-sweet smile that vanished as soon as her skirts settled. Melba wore 7 satin ribbons in her smooth brown hair and a million thumbstacks on the bottom of her hard-soled shoes. Now she tapped the floor from her seat and glowered at Ruby. Ruby's fingers turned cold around the shoebox, and she swallowed hard. Miss Latham's voice was soft. How are you, Ruby? Fine, Ruby said. Mrs. Latham smiled, and Ruby relaxed her grip on the shoebox. Here's your shoes. She tried to smile back as she stuck the box out in front of her. Melba Jane kept tapping the floor and staring at Ruby. Help me try these on, will you? Melba's mother went back to her conversation with Mr. Harvey as if nothing unusual had happened, as if she'd talked to Ruby every day since last summer's accident. Ruby began lacing the new shoes. She felt Melba's eyes on her and listened to her tap, 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 louder and faster until she could stand it no longer. What's the matter with you, Melba Jane? Melba let a slow grin spread across her face. She slid down in her seat so the heels of her shoes touched the floor. Tap, tap, tippity, tap. Cluck, she whispered. Cluck, cluck, cluck. Ruby's face grew hot. Stop it, Melba Jane. Melba Jane slid all the way out of her chair. Tap, thunk. and squatted on the floor, her hands in her armpits, her elbows out, and waving like a chicken's wing. "Stop that!" Melba shot Ruby a funny, loony, bug-eyed look. "Bwack! Bwack! Bwack!" "Shut up!" Ruby jumped to her feet. "You just shut up." Mrs. Latham was startled out of her conversation with Mr. Harvey. "What's the matter?" Miss Mattie had corralled the younger Latham children and was trying mightily to shove them out the front door. Now she jerked her attention toward Ruby and Melba Jane. Melba's eyebrows shot up. Her lips formed a crooked O of pretend fright, and she shrank from Ruby with little tippity taps. She flapped her elbows and swooned. Then she stopped, stuck out her chin, and spit a word at Ruby. "Chicken!" Ruby bared her teeth, flung her arms over her head, and made her hands into claws. Then she lunged for Melba Jane. "Arr!" A look of genuine panic mixed with surprise flew across Melba Jane's face. It only took her a second to scream, "Mama!" Tap, 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 tap. She flew toward the front door of the mercantile, slamming into Miss Mattie as she ran. Miss Mattie spun around like a whirligig as Melba Jane scrambled through the pile of little Lathams at the doorway, flattening most of them. Ruby was right behind Melba, her claw hands reaching for her. Little Lathams squealed. Miss Mattie clutched the coat rack for dear life. Ruby reached the door and prepared to hurtle over the little Lathams. Instead, she hurtled into Miss Eula, walking through the door with a pile of mail. Chapter 3. Ugh! Miss Eula clutched Ruby to her, and together they fell into the pile of Lathams. Mail and Lathams spluttered across the porch planks. Melba Jane ran down the sidewalk, still screaming. Little Lathams began picking themselves up and gathering mail. "Eula!" Miss Mattie gave her hair a weak pat. "You all right, Mattie?" "Ruby?" "Yes, ma'am." The smaller children were dazed, but finally quiet. One of them handed Miss Eula the mail. "Thank you, darling." She waved it at Miss Mattie. "No shirt buttons today, but there's a crate of garden tools waiting for somebody strong to carry it over." "What's happening here?" "I don't know yet, but I intend to find out." Miss Mattie straightened her dress and pulled herself together. Customers crowded the front door to see what had happened. For heaven's sake, it's not a sideshow. Folks drifted back inside, and everyday noise of the store picked up. Mrs. Latham had gathered her children, whispered something to Miss Mattie, and was out the door, following Melba's screams. Ruby edged toward the sidewalk. "You come back here, young lady." Miss Mattie's eyes were full of fire. "Now, Mattie," Miss Eula brushed herself off. "No harm done. You know as well as I do those Latham children have become uncontrollable." Miss Mattie shook her finger at Ruby, then fished a handkerchief out of her apron pocket and mopped her forehead. "I know Layla and her hands are full these days with Lionel gone. I hate that she does, but someone needs to speak to her about those children. Maybe someone will, but it's probably best if it doesn't come from us." Miss Mattie stuffed her handkerchief back into her apron pocket and eyeballed Miss Eula. "I need help." She went inside, and the screen door slapped closed behind her. Miss Eula sat down beside Ruby on the top step of the porch. Ruby turned toward her and spread her arms out wide. "She made fun of me And the chickens. She squawked like a chicken. She called me a chicken. Ruby stared intently into Miss Eula's face. Miss Eula stared straight ahead, looking at nothing. It's so hot you can hear the dust blow. What am I going to do about Melba? Ruby blew strings of red hair out of her face. Miss Eula gave Ruby a sympathetic look. I don't know, sugar. I wish I knew. She wants you to feel as bad as she does. That's all. Can you ignore her? Make her float away in your mind. You should have heard her. Whack, 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 right in front of me and the whole store. A honeysuckle vine curled around the porch railing. Miss Eula picked a blossom and handed it to Ruby. Ruby pulled the stem through and got a drop of nectar on her tongue. Miss Eula twisted off some thin branches of honeysuckle and began weaving them in a circle like a wreath, leaves, buds, and all. You know, Ruby, Melba acts brave, but she's scared underneath. Look at how she skedaddled out of here. Imagine what it must be like for her and her family since her daddy died. There are so many children in that house, and she's the oldest. Imagine being the oldest of 6 when you are only 9. And her mama depends on her now more than ever. She plunked the honeysuckle wreath on Ruby's head. Poor old Melba. Poor old Melba! Ruby shot up from the steps. The wreath skimmed off her head, but she caught it. Poor old me! A letter dropped from Miss Eula's lap to the step. She scooped it up and changed the subject. Ruby, I almost forgot. I've got wonderful mail here from your Uncle Johnson and Aunt Annette. She waved an airmail envelope in front of Ruby. The postmark read, Honolulu. Ruby didn't notice. Good garden of peas, Miss Eula. I forgot my big news. You'll never believe it. She jammed the wreath onto her head so it wouldn't fall off. It made her whole head smell sweet. Miss Eula smiled and tucked Johnson's letter into her apron pocket. I just might, sugar, since I've already read your mail. You got it? Good. I was hoping you'd picked up all your mail. I got it, and I left you some as well. Isn't it a miracle about Ivy? She's going to be a mother. It's wonderful surprise, Ruby. Let me go to the end of this busy day, and we can visit the chickens together. What do you say? Yes, yes, yes. Ruby's heart lifted. I'll go check my mail right now. Miss Eula reached into her apron pocket. Here's a lemon drop for helping, Miss Mattie. She appreciates your help, sugar. No, she doesn't. Ruby plopped the lemon drop in her mouth and tried to talk around it. It clacked on her teeth. Miss Mattie is a crab. Well, she's got a lot on her mind, honey. When your grandpa died, she lost her brother. Now she has all the responsibility for the store on her shoulders. Ruby choked as she tried to change the subject. Miss Eula pumped her once on her back, and Ruby coughed the lemon drop into her hand, then tossed it back into her mouth and wiped her sticky hand on her overalls. Her cheeks puckered with the sour taste as she talked with a fish mouth. I've never seen Miss Mattie smile. Miss Eula chuckled. Oh, she smiles, but she is who she is, sugar. So is Melba Jane, aren't we all? Go on now. I know your mama must have supper waiting. Ruby hitched up her left overall strap and stepped into a buttery Late afternoon sun. Long shadows slid across the storefronts, and the air was spangled with dust. The sweet taste of lemon drop began to come through the sour. Grandpa Garnet had been the one who had loved lemon drops. He told Ruby most people were like lemon drops, sour and sweet together. She couldn't see it. Grandpa Garnet would have loved the story of saving Ivy, Beamy, and Bess. And now there were eggs. There was good news. It was so good to share it, and there was no better friend to share it with than Miss Eula. Another letter, June 6th. Dear Ruby, what exciting news about Ivy. I'm glad we decided to give the children the old greenhouse for a hen house. It makes a nice home for the new chicks with all those windows. Let's meet at the Pink Palace at 6 o'clock. A lucky hour. I'm going to parch some peanuts in the oven. But first, we will cluck over Ivy. What a gal! So are you. I have big news for you, too. It's a surprise. I will tell you tonight. Love, you're almost done for the day. Grandmother, Miss Eula. And that's where we'll stop for today. That's the end of chapter 3.